Hello, everyone, and welcome to another American Gods Chat with M. I am your host, Emily S. Whitten, and we are here to talk about American Gods Season 3. Now, if you are someone who, in fact, has been watching American Gods, you will know that Season 3 is over. But we are still talking about it because last week was the season finale, episode 10. And so I'm going to talk about episode 10 this episode, and then this episode of the live stream. And then we're going to probably chat a little bit about what else we might expect to see if we get to see more. Before we do that, I would like to remind you, as always, that you can like this video and subscribe to the Movers and Shakers Unlimited YouTube if you are enjoying this and want to see more and want to support us. It does really mean a lot to us. And you can also follow us on Twitter. My handle is, the Movers and Shakers Unlimited handle is Move and Shake, UNLTD. And my handle is @TheEmilyESSE. So you can follow us, you can chat with us, you can let us know your thoughts, and give us your support because, it means a lot to us when we're doing this to know people are listening. So before we get started, I would like to remind you, as always, that another thing that I do is I am a graphic novel writer, and we have a graphic novel that has been out called The Underfoot, The Mighty Deep. And then there is going to be a new graphic novel, The Underfoot Into the Sun, coming out April 20th of this year. We're very excited. So if you haven't checked those out and you like adventure stories about intelligent animals living in post-apocalyptic worlds where they use science and history to survive and to thrive and to solve mysteries and to have friendships and all kinds of adventures, then you might like these. They are appropriate for middle grade and up. I say everyone from about the age of 7 to adults is probably going to enjoy them. And if you are a supporter of the Underfoot and you are wondering what we're doing during this unfortunate pandemic where we can't go to conventions and meet fans and sign books, and you might want something like that, we are actually working on some book plates. So we're going to have these book plates that we will have available for book 1 and book 2 signed by the creators. And those will be, in fact, available soon through online ordering. So we'll have one for book 1 and one for book 2. They are different to match the theming of the books. And we're very excited to be able to provide something to you during this time when you might want to have some of the experiences like getting your book signed, but unfortunately we can't yet. So stay tuned for more news on that. I will put it up on my Twitter and my website, which is going to have a little bit of a shop overhaul as well. So now that I've reminded you about those things, I would also like to recommend something, as I have been doing. I actually have recommended this podcast before, but this particular episode is really good for American Gods. So the podcast is You're Dead to Me, and it's a BBC Radio 4 history podcast where they have a public historian named Greg Jenner who brings together another historian who has a particular expertise in whatever topic they're talking about, and a comedian. And the three of them talk about a specific time in history or a specific person in history and discuss, what we know, what we don't know, fun facts, interesting things. It's really lively and fun. Greg's a great host, and the comedians and historians are always very interesting. And on March 12th, they aired one that was on Old Norse literature. So this one talks about a lot of the things that are in American Gods, a lot of the things that we've been seeing in this season and in all of the seasons to do with Odin's story and to do with the history and background of, the gods. And it was so appropriate. I started listening to it this morning, actually, as I was catching up on some of them. And I said, oh, this is perfect for anyone who's interested in the stories behind American Gods. Of course, Neil Gaiman has also written a whole book about Norse myth and mythology. So that is another thing to check out if you haven't. But I just happened to be listening to this today. I love this podcast. It really makes me happy, so I wanted to recommend it to all of you in case you need something to listen to. So now that we have done that, I wanted to briefly mention that, as usual, Ricky Whittle had been doing Moon Mondays, where on his Instagram Live on Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern, he has been talking to different actors in American Gods. This past week, He talked with Bruce Langley, Ashley Reyes, and Demore Barnes all together at the same time. And it was a lot of fun. If you didn't get a chance to see it, you can watch them on his Instagram. You can go and find it in his feed and still be able to watch the videos. So if you enjoy the show, if you like to see some behind the scenes stuff, you can check out that chat. And I don't know if he's going to be doing anything else in the interim. It looks like perhaps he's done with Moon Mondays given the end of the season. But if I see something, I will certainly let people know, via Twitter or videos if I'm doing videos at the time. So, but they're really fun, and you can go back and look at the old ones. If you're missing American Gods chat and things like that, you can scroll through and look at the old ones on his Instagram, and I would recommend hanging out with the cast, so to speak, by watching the chats, because they are super fun, and Ricky's a great host / interviewer, or whatever you would like to call it. They're very, informal. There is occasionally blue language, so be warned. All right. So now that I've chatted about that, I did also want to tell you that even though this is the last recap that I'm doing, I'm not quite done with the series, because I would like to go a bit further in thinking about, the season, and, maybe some other fun stuff I've got up my sleeve or in my head. So I will at least be doing another one where I'm going to be talking about sort of a retrospective of the entire season. And I may do some other things to do with comparisons of book and show, or something else like that. So stay tuned. I will let people know on Twitter, but at least the next, I anticipate there will be at least one more of these, and possibly a few after that. So stay alert and aware if you want to keep watching American Gods things while we're in an off season, hopefully, with more to come. All right, now let's talk about the season finale, episode 10 of American Gods. So we're as usual, we're talking about the top 3 moments in the episode, or the top 3 storylines. And the first one is basically it's a loose affiliation of things that are going on, but it's really summarized by tying up some of the narrative loose ends and potentially leaving some hanging on purpose, theoretically. So the main things that are going on here is that, as we'll remember, Bilquis has been given a quest, and we wanted to learn more about that. We've seen in the previous episodes how she's gotten some direction as to what her quest is. And on top of that, then, of course, we've got all the things going on after, Odin's death with the new gods and the old gods. So our cold open this episode starts out with Bilquis and Eugenia, who you'll remember was the older woman at the party Bilquis attended, who it turned out had been midwife to Shadow's mother, who had helped his mother give birth to, or deliver the baby, basically. And in this, there's a scene where Bilquis is in the kitchen with Eugenia, and it actually was very reminiscent of the scene in an earlier, I want to say it was an earlier season, in which an older woman passed away in her kitchen. The kitchen almost looked the same, or really reminded me of the same kind of setup. And so Eugenia is in there, and she's telling about a belief or a myth regarding eggs, hens hatching eggs with 2 yolks, or it's an interesting myth that she's describing. And I confess I was a little tiny bit distracted by the fact that she turns around and she's got coins on her eyes, which is, of course, I would assume a reference to how coins are sometimes put on the eyes of the deceased. So I'm not sure if this is an image or a vision that Bilquis is having after Eugenia's death, or as she is passing away, or whatever the case may be. But we know that Eugenia was dying in the earlier episode, and then held on to tell Bilquis her purpose, and about her and about Eugenia's story, having been Shadow's mother's midwife. So also there's a bit in which a man walks in. He's dressed sort of like a boxer, and he kisses Eugenia on the cheek. And I confess I might not be totally clear on what exactly was happening with the boxer. So I may have missed. He may have been the god who was in the mural in the last episode, but I could be wrong on that. But through these visions, Bilquis has a conversation with Eugenia and learns a little bit more, and she knows that she has to find Shadow's soulmate. And she has these visions where she sees Shadow and Laura in fire and some other, images flashing through the fire. And she's kind of doing a scrying with wax, and she spills hot wax, and it turns into a map of the United States, and a crystal on her neck points to a point in the center of the in the exact center of the United States in Kansas. And Ibis is narrating, as after we see this, that this location in the middle of Kansas in the center of the United States is the least sacred place in America, because it is the exact center, and it was noted as such, and they built people built hotels and things for people to come and see it as the center. Like, nobody came to see it, so it's like the least sacred place in America, but there is a hotel, the Center of America Hotel, and this is where the story is happening for a lot of this episode, is the Center of America Hotel. So basically, and it's essentially ground zero because it's the least sacred place in America. So because it's the least sacred place, there's the gods do not have the ability to use their powers in the same way. And because, of course, they are also meeting supposedly to have more talks. At the time that we start to see it, Shadow and Ibis are arriving together. And at this time also we see the ravens, which are Odin's ravens. They're nearby, and Ibis notes that they always stayed close to their master, and Shadow says, "They're with me now," which indicates that he believes in his growing power and his connection to his father and to his father's godliness. So that's pretty interesting. And Ibis, as they discuss Odin's death, Ibis notes that the thought of being powerless did not appeal to Odin, Shadow's father, and they kind of ruminate on his passing. So Cordelia is there as well, and she lets Shadow know that Laura is the one who killed Odin, which he was not aware of, and Shadow is somewhat surprised by this, although of course he shouldn't be too surprised by it because, of all the things that Odin did to mess up Laura's life. But anyway, so he's kind of surprised by this. And then Laura actually has also been brought to the hotel by Mr. World, or Mr. World's cronies or lackeys. And Mr. World and the Crispin Glover guys shows up, and they have a conversation. It's interesting, actually, because he gives a little explanation for why we're seeing him or her as several different aspects. So we've seen the 3 different actors doing the Mr. Ms. World, appearances. And he says, from time to time, I see the reflection in the mirror and I need change. So he actually, he consciously does this. So he consciously sees himself or herself and decides he or she wants to be somebody else. So I thought that was pretty interesting how they dropped that little bit in there. So Laura says, "Why in the heck did you bring me to this hotel where all these gods are here who want me dead?" And Mr. World, Crispin Glover, Mr. World says that no gods can harm you here, so be patient, and we have to deal with all this stuff. And essentially, World reminds her or explains to her that they can't know that Laura and World were colluding on this, assassination of Odin, or that could ignite a war. So, Mr. World will tell the gods that Laura was tortured by him, and then he let her go, and that it was her vendetta that killed Odin, that it wasn't to do with Mr. World. So he's gonna lie to them. And he also notes so that's the plan. And he also notes that Shadow is here, and it's not clear if he's under the god prohibition. So in other words, Shadow theoretically could perhaps harm Laura because he might not be under this god prohibition of this area of America. So it's another reference to the idea that we don't quite know what Shadow is, in the sense that, you know, he's half human and half god, and so we're not sure how his powers and his limitations function, which is something he himself has been exploring through this season and something that has been referenced before. There's a few different little bits in here that kind of just give us flashes that fit into this general kind of what's going on, but they don't necessarily have to do with the Laura part of the story, like directly, you know, not linearly. But there is a point where Ibis is writing Shadow Moon's story. So that's interesting. We see a little clip of that. And we also see a clip of Bilquis communing with the peacock in the woods. Beautiful scene. And so there's some stuff going on that's connected to that. And meanwhile, back at the hotel, Chernabog is having some really loud and exciting intercourse with the front desk clerk from the hotel. Laura can hear what's going on, and then she goes through the bench. She's been locked in her room by Mr. World, who says, you know, have patience. I'll explain to them that, you know, this is what happened, and then you'll be able to go. But she's Laura Moon. She's not going to stand for that. So she goes up in the hotel's like ventilation system, and she's crawling through the vents, and she sees Shadow lying on his bed, and she's like kind of, you know, getting through the hotel. And meanwhile, Mr. World is talking to the old gods. So they've met in like a conference area or meeting room of the hotel essentially, and he's talking to the old gods. And you know, he says we're meeting with respect. You know, even though the new gods and the old gods have been fighting, we're meeting with respect, gathering in this place of godlessness to deliver this body to eternity in accordance with Norse ritual. So we're trying to honor this, you know, passing. And he says, in return, we just want peace. Laura is immortal. She, you know, she had this vendetta. It wasn't us. And he also says that it's the duty of the son to avenge the father's death. So in other words, it's Shadow's duty to avenge Odin's death, Odin's murder. And Chernabog means, or he says, he means you have to bash head in until brain dribble through her eyes, you know, because of course that's how he is. But it was a funny line, so I liked it. So Shadow's like, okay, you know, give her to me. And then Laura comes down out of the vents, you know, she's escaped the room and she's not standing for this. And she blows the whole thing up. She says, he recruited me to kill Wednesday without starting a war. You know, how could I have gotten the spear, known the time and place to find Wednesday without his help? And it's revealed that she's telling the truth. And so then Chernabog, of course, tries to kill Mr. World, but because of the location, his hammer is stopped in midair and he's not able to do so. So Shadow says he'll kill Laura, and Chernabog says, if you hit the neck, it will be painful. I recommend the neck. It's Chernabog's. I don't know. There are certain things about certain characters or gods, as it were, that I just love in the show, and Peter Stormara's Chernabog is one of them. So Laura and Shadow are having a conversation, and Laura is saying, you know, I didn't just do this for me. Okay, maybe I did do it for me, but you're also free now. You can live your life. And, you know, she's saying, like, go and live your life, and or maybe come with me and live your life. And Shadow says to her, like, you know, I can be a leader. I have a destiny. So he's, you know, we've seen him buying into the old gods, you know, information and his lineage as Wednesday's son. And so he's saying, I have this destiny. And Laura's like, are you saying you're a god? You have a chance to, you know, take your life back, and instead you're listening to all of this. And Shadow is angry with her. He says, you know, like, you don't believe I'm capable of doing great things. So, you know, take your miserable, lonely life and enjoy it. I am going to do other stuff. And she's like, I know stuff too. I've learned too. I've been dead. I'm alive again. And all of this, you know, it's not that. It's not just, you know, about that. And she says, you know, you're going to become your father. You're going to become your old man. And Anyway, but the upshot of the conversation, which is a little bit unsatisfactory for both of them, is that as Wednesday's last living son, what happens to his killer is Shadow's prerogative, and he decides that he's going to let Laura go and sit vigil for Mr. Wednesday. So Laura goes back to the motel, and she has sort of a silent communion with herself in this really lonely, greenlit, like, sad hotel room. And then she sees a vision of Shadow being stuck to the hotel room wall by a spear and bleeding. And then she falls asleep, and she sees this image of her, or I'm sorry, not it. There is an image of her in the dream in like fancy makeup and hair and this beautiful dress, all like done up. And then Bilquis appears, and she's dancing with Bilquis, and they have this very dreamy kiss, which I'm sure excited any Bilquis and Laura Moon shippers that are probably out there. I know there's got to be some. There's some shippers for everybody. And then she wakes up, and Bilquis is at the hotel room door, and she's like, "Oh, thank gods I found you." And so Bilquis has come to find Laura because of her quest, in which she saw the visions of Shadow and Laura Moon. So that is basically where some of those loose ends have been pulled together, and or there might be more to them, but we've gotten to a closing point with some of this. So that's the first storyline. The next one that we're going to talk about is to do with Tech Boy and Mr. World, the New Gods Mutiny. So Tech Boy, so he's been trying to figure out what's going on with him. He had been glitching, as we'll recall, and he had ever since Bilquis touched him, and he had been having emotions, although he was denying they were emotions because, of course, and he then talked to Mr. World, and he said he was needing to find artifact number 1 because that would help him with what was going on with him. And Mr. World denied knowing what it was, but then Mr. World, of course, was keeping in this bunker underground. And so we come upon Tech Boy, and he's chewing on like magnetic tape, like black, data tape. And one of Mr. World's minions is like, "Are you trying to consume raw data? That's messed up." And it's a really funny image of him like chewing on this tape. And apparently it was, it was, I forget what Bruce Langley said it was, but it wasn't like food. It was like he had to chew on tape, like some sort of stuff, to get those shots. So that must have been fun to shoot. And the guy the minion tries to box him again with that helmet that he had been wearing before. And Tech Boy turns it back around on him in midair and gets it on his face. And he's like, "I hacked out of that thing. Did you really think I wouldn't reprogram it?" So he finds the sub-basement, and he finds artifact number 1, which he's been looking for, which looks like a shard or a stone kind of like pointy thing. And he touches it, and he sees all these images. So there's like the printing press, the light bulb, a nuclear mushroom cloud, all of this stuff going on. And Mr. World comes in, and Tech Boy is like, "What is this thing?" And he says, "That's your totem. You have no idea how vital you are. You are perhaps the most powerful of all of the gods," because Tech Boy, as we learn in this episode, is the embodiment of human innovation. So he is more than we thought he was. And he is also the bridge from the old gods to the new gods. And Tech Boy, like us, is going, "Why don't I know any of that?" And basically the answer is, as human technology evolved, every time he would evolve, Tech Boy, the embodiment of the innovation, would evolve and forget who you really are, forget who he was, forget his past. So, and he didn't have his totem, and so he couldn't remember his origin. So, Mr. World talks about Shard, the app we remember from the previous episode and from the previous plans before that, and says that, there is no progress without Tech Boy. And he instead encases Tech Boy in kind of a electronic field. So Tech Boy is trapped, and Tech Boy says, "Who are you?" And we had thought that Mr. World is the embodiment of globalization and modernization and all of that. And it now seems like perhaps we were wrong, because he says, people say this is the age of technology, but they are wrong. And he kind of claps his hands, and the totem disappears between them. And he says, this is the age of manipulation. Trickery is what I do best. And Tech Boy is like, who the are you? And Mr. World leaves, whistling a tune that may be the music that Laura had been hearing, or it may be something else. In the moment, I thought maybe that's what it was, but it kind of came and went really quick, so I'm not sure. But contrary to what we may have thought of Mr. World and of Tech Boy, we learn that both of them have deeper and different meanings than how they started out in the series. And so Tech Boy is more than just technology. He is an ever-evolving representation of human innovation, and he is very powerful, and he doesn't know it. And that's one of the reasons, presumably, why he's not in power. So that's part of that. And then Mr. World, who one would think as the new god of globalization, would be on the in support of this innovation and this evolution and technology. He instead has revealed that his key element is manipulation and trickery. And so some folks who have read the book might have some thoughts on this, or if you haven't, you may be getting some ideas on that. But that is where we leave technology, Technology Boy, or Technical Boy, sorry, and Mr. World. So the third thread of this story in episode 10 of season 3 is about Shadow's destiny and his purpose. And so this is where Shadow says, I've made the decision. I'm going to sit vigil for Odin. And he thinks that he has a destiny, and it's his, he's inspired by the idea of being a part of something greater. So we're going to go back to when he arrives at the hotel. He arrives with Ibis, and, he talks with Ibis and the other old gods about the old Norse death ritual and honoring and respecting, Odin with sitting this vigil. And it's revealed to him that a vigil in this instance means Shadow must be bound to Yggdrasil, the world tree, as Odin once was, and he has to do what Odin did to gain knowledge. And so what Odin did was he was stabbed with a spear and reborn, and was reborn. So in the midst of this, Shadow also has a dream. This is when Laura's looking at him through the vents because, as we know, the show jumps back and forth, and I'm trying to streamline it into the main chunks of story that are going on here. And so when she's looking at him through the vents as she's crawling through the hotel earlier, as I had discussed it, he has this dream, and he's seeing two parts of himself. In essence, he's seeing laborers or slaves in cotton fields, and they're saying, come with us, we need you. And then he's also seeing Odin on a horse with his armor, looking like the old god version of Odin. And he reaches out his hand, and Shadow reaches out and is swung up onto the horse with Odin. So he, in this instance, has made his choice to sit the vigil for Odin and to embrace that part of his history and his legacy, and I guess see where that takes him. So, Cordelia and Shadow, then he wakes up, and Laura has, come out of the vent, as we had said earlier, and there's some conversation with Cordelia and Shadow talking about, Wednesday and Laura and everything that's been happening. After that, there's a funereal drive to Yggdrasil, the world tree, and we meet the Norns, who are the three women, past, present, and future, who guard and tend to the world tree. And so, and they water it, they tend to the water that nourishes the tree as well. So they say that they've been waiting for him, and they're all speaking together. It's a very Three Fates kind of thing, mother, maiden, crone, maiden, mother, crone. So there's like a young one, a middle one, an older one. It's like the stars as well. And Ibis and Cordelia are talking about it, and Ibis says, "Oh, this is my first ritual of this kind," you know. And meanwhile, Shadow's taken off by the Norn, and they are disrobing him and washing him in this water, and saying the water of time will wash away the past and prepare you for the future. And you know, they're bathing him, and there's some Ricky Whittle pretty clothesless scenes. And if you've been watching the Moon Mondays, you'll know that in at least a few of them, he's talked about having to, you know, stay in really good shape because you never know when you might have to disrobe in this show. So we get a little more of that here. And you know, Shadow's told, you know, once you're on the tree, there is no turning back. And he says, I don't have a choice. And I either survive this and become something more, or I stay and Kernabog hits me in the face. So it's pretty fair. So Cordelia's like, or we could find a way out. You know, there's all these cons we could try. We could do something. Don't get on the tree. You have nothing to prove. And Shadow's like, see you in 9 days. So he has to stay on this tree for 9 days, which is a lot of days. So he, you know, he gets on the tree, and there's these like fairy lights that come out, and the branches twine around his arms and pull him up. And the Norn, and it hurts. It's painful because they're like going into him as well. And the Norn say, don't fight it. It makes the pain worse. And so he's pulled up on the tree. And give supernatural things. We see the northern lights, and he hears the advice of the evening star, if I'm remembering correctly, that says, you know, when you cannot see the way, the night sky will guide you. He sees a raven, I think it was, against the sun. I think he hears Whiskey Jack talking in the clouds, you know, in all of this. And he sees Laura saying, I think she's the one who says, like, is this the destiny that you were talking about in the, oh no, I think that's Whiskey Jack. If I'm remembering correctly, there was a lot going on in this season. He's seeing a lot of different things. But then he sees a vision of Laura, and she says, take it from me, puppy, you're dying. And, you know, he's really thirsty. He's asking for water. It snows. Maybe he makes it snow. And he's having this dream sequence in which the snow then turns to cotton, like cotton fluff that's in the fields with the laborers or the slaves, and Shadow is dressed like one of them, and they're humming spirituals. And it's very much another reminder of his duality, or his dual heritages. And then the bison with the flaming eyes that we've seen in his dreams comes from the northern lights and looks at him, and I think it gores him. I think, like, with its horns. And then he's on a plane, and he's on the plane where he met Wednesday the first time, where it's reminiscent of that. And he sees a pasty from Mabel's, and he breaks it open, and there are maggots inside, which is gross. I always, it's unnecessary to the story, I guess, but I hate it when shows do that. And then he sees that Wednesday is on the plane as well, and he's offering him cashews. And he has these flashbacks reminding him of Wednesday's, personality as a liar and a cheat and a con man who's capable of deceit and great cruelty. And, he remembers that Wednesday, or Odin, is out for himself in most instances. And he says to him, please tell me death isn't being on a plane with you. And Odin, and he says, this can't be happening. This isn't happening. And Odin says, this is something that was planned even before you were born. And reveals that, his plan, this was his plan all along. He says, a blood sacrifice from a son? Wow, that's powerful enough to restore me to all my former glory. So essentially what has happened here is Shadow has died by sitting the vigil for Odin. He has died, dedicated his death to Odin, and because of this, Odin is gained the power from that blood sacrifice. And it's not something that Odin didn't expect. It is, in fact, what he was planning the whole time. So, meanwhile, he hears Laura's voice saying, what did Wednesday ever do for you? And Wednesday reveals that earning Shadow's love would have been difficult, so he appealed to his godly ambition. And Shadow said, I'm your son. I am a god. And again, there's this repetition of we're not really quite sure what Shadow is. Odin says the jury's still out on that, but you're definitely a chip off the old block. And he reminds him that they both crave power and says the only difference is that Wednesday is not ashamed of it. So Shadow has martyred himself for Wednesday, and Wednesday then jumps out of the plane saying, "This is where I get off. Thank you, son." And Shadow is stuck in his seat. He wakes up on the tree. He whispers, "Father," and he is then pulled into the tree while Chernabog and Cordelia and Ibis are watching. And in the distance, we see thunder, we see rolling clouds, we hear ravens, the sheet on Odin's body flies away, and Chernabog says, "Is this the death of the old gods?" And Ibis says, "Or something much worse." And that is the end of season 3, episode 10. So that's where we are left by the end of this season. Let's think about what might come next. We don't know, but that's the next thing we're going to chat about real quick. At this time, I haven't heard any news about a season 4. Nothing is confirmed, etc. And we don't know, where things might go if there is a season 4. But basically, in a how it's been, how it's going kind of thing, we're in a situation where the old gods know that Mr. World was behind Odin dying. We now know that Mr. World is not what we thought he was. He's not the epitome of globalization, modernization, etc. And we know that he's been manipulating things. So what else might he manipulate? We also know that Technical Boy is not just technology, but is in fact the embodiment of human innovation and could be more powerful than any of the other gods. But currently he's imprisoned by Mr. World. So where is his story going to go? We know that Shadow is gone, but is he? Because again, we don't know what exactly he is. He's maybe a demigod. What might happen with him next? And Bilquis has been given this quest to find his soulmate. She's gone to Laura, who maybe is his soulmate. It appears from the visions that's what the visions are trying. The fire visions in the beginning were trying to indicate, and then Bilquis shows up at Laura's doorstep. So it seems like Bilquis is still trying to fulfill this quest. So even though Shadow is on the fingers crossed for season 4, I agree 100%. So even though Shadow is in the tree and is theoretically gone, they're still going forward with this. They're still trying to get there. So it could be that he shows up again, and Odin is returning at full power. So he's coming back. The old gods have gotten a huge power boost, and we don't know what that's going to mean for the new gods, for Odin, Wednesday, for Mr. World, and what his plans really are, and what he really intended, and what's really going on there. So we don't know any of that. And there is an interview that Neil Gaiman did recently with Entertainment Weekly, in which he notes that if this was the end of American Gods on TV, it would be an extremely frustrating way to end a season or end a series. So obviously, everyone's hoping for a season 4. And there was also news in that article in which the confirmation was that if there's a season 4, that would be used to wrap up the book story. So American Gods from that book would be wrapped by series or season 4. So if there was, for instance, a season 5, then that would go into new territory. Now, Neil has talked before. Obviously, there's Anansi Boys, which is a different. It's a connected story, and it's the sequel, but it's not directly linear to this. It looks at other things, and so Neil has talked about more American Gods and things like that. So it could be a situation where they end up doing some storylines that come straight out of Neil's head as he's writing more book, or as who knows exactly how a season 5 could go. But it seems like that would be a goal. I know that Neil also said that he would like the showrunner to come back. He phrased it more politically, politely and politically. But I think in part the thought is, oh, I have to start working all over again with another person and train him up, on what's going on and all that stuff. But he has expressed that he'd like the showrunner to come back and that he'd like everyone to come back for it. And of course, we would love to see, all the characters back in action and everything, and see what's going to happen with the story. We've had three seasons of this show. If we get 4, we've got the whole book. Why not do a season 4? I mean, that I would be great to even do a season 5 and see what happens next and see what Neil's got in his head. But I would love to at least.
Emily, it looks like we have another comment. We have another comment from Emilio. So let me put it up here.
We've got another comment. Oh,
yes.
He says, I think Shadow will be resurrected as an Orisha or part Orisha. I suspect there is some kind of connection there. I like that thought. I mean, that is in fact something that I've had some thoughts about as well. So thank you for sharing. Given that, he's got this dual nature and we've seen him having visions which have to do with tying into both parts of that nature. And of course, the bison god with the flaming eyes, and so it would be really interesting to see what happens if Bilquis and Laura, or Bilquis completes her quest and reunites Shadow with his soulmate, and he becomes whole. And I would really love to see where that storyline goes. So good point there. And the Orisha are some of my favorite characters on the show. So I would be glad to see more of them. So I mean, season 4 would be great to have. I'd love to see them wrap up the book. I'd be really interested to see even more than that if we go that far. But at the very least, let's get through the book, please. So I mean, this was season 3. I really enjoyed the whole thing. I think it had a great feel to it. I think we learned a lot about some of the characters. I think that they really developed some of the ones that aren't in the book as much. Favorites of mine include like Bilquis and Technical Boy. But I mean, so much good stuff. And Laura Moon, who I didn't have a lot of affection for in the book, to be honest, but I really love the portrayal of her by Emily Browning in the show. So yeah, we'll see what happens next, but I really have been enjoying this season. Speaking of that, as I said, I will be doing a retrospective of the season, so that'll be my next episode. And we'll talk about the overall arc through these episodes that I've recapped each week, where we started at the beginning when I kind of recapped 1 and 2 as quickly as I could, and see where we've got to and what our thoughts are on that. Might talk about some other things, we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted, but at the very least, we're going to talk about that. So thank you again for watching. As a reminder, please like these videos if you've been watching them and enjoying them. Please subscribe to the Movers and Shakers Unlimited YouTube channel. And please go ahead, and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, everywhere. We're all everywhere. Our Twitter accounts, Movers and Shakers Unlimited, is, as you can see there, and Instagram is as you can see there. And my Twitter, Instagram, everything is just at the Emily ESSE, as you can see there. So feel free to, follow and chat with me about American Gods. Tell me what you liked, what your thoughts are, what you're missing, what you want to see next season. Just hang out and be people who appreciate, shows based on literature, whatever you want to do, or Neil Gaiman fans, or all that kind of stuff. And my hashtag when I talk about American Gods is AGChat, WEMMNSU, as you see there, AGChat with M. So thank you for, watching and listening. So, please stay tuned. And don't forget that I'm going to be doing some more American Gods stuff, even before we hopefully hear about a season 4. Thank you very much. See you later.